All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Fire Service Minimum Standard Guidelines with the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. My name is Adam Brome, and I am an Administrative Coordinator with SARM. As always, we will start off today's webinar with a brief introduction to the Adobe Connect platform. We will then transition into the main presentation, followed by a Q&A session. This webinar will be recorded, and a copy of that recording will be available on our on our website on the webinars page following today's session. To maximize your audio and video quality during today's webinar, please join through Google Chrome or the Adobe Connect desktop app. If you're joining us on your mobile device, please make sure you download the mobile app for a better experience. As you'll notice, there is a chat box located right on the right side of your webinar window, and this is visible to all webinar participants and facilitators. You can use this to connect with other attendees, inform us of any technical difficulties you may be having, or provide any other general comments and/or feedback. There's also a dedicated question and answer box labeled Q&A. This is located right underneath the chat box. This is where you can submit any questions that you may have regarding the webinar content throughout today's session, and these questions will be answered during the Q&A session. Please do not submit any questions through the chat box. If we do run out of time before your question has been asked during the Q&A session, our presenters will follow up with you directly offline following the webinar. There will also be a copy of today's presentation available for download during the Q&A portion of the session in the box labeled Files next to the chat. Please let me know in the chat if you're unable to download the file, and I will email it to you directly. And again, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during today's event, please notify us in the chat box, and we will do our best to troubleshoot. And now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Alicia Bay, SARM's policy analyst, who will be moderating today's webinar.
Thank you, Adam. Well, I think we're in for a real treat. We have some very special guests. We have Ray Unrau, the Director of Client Services and Preparedness from the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. A little bit about Ray is he started his work life in EMS in 1982 and became a paramedic in 1987. He began working as a firefighter with the Saskatoon Fire Department in 1993. And in 1999, he moved into the department's training division to instruct the technical rescue program. In 2002, Ray took a job as the Director of Emergency Planning for the City of Saskatoon. And in 2017, he accepted a position with the Province of Saskatchewan and is here with us now. Ray loves spending any time he can with his family and lives to fulfill the whims of his two beautiful granddaughters. We also have with us today Amanda Dowk. She's the Director of Enterprise Projects and Stakeholder Relations with SPSA. She joined the Government of Saskatchewan in late 2000 and has spent the majority of her time with the Ministry of Agriculture. In 2019, she joined the SPSA as the Manager of Project Delivery. And during the pandemic, she joined the Ministry of Health's COVID-19 Response Unit, where she acted as the Director of Projects, leading the province's vaccine campaign. Thank you for that, Amanda. Since October of 2021, she rejoined the SPSA as the Director of Enterprise Projects and Stakeholder Relations, where she has the responsibility for public safety education. I've seen a couple presentations from these folks now, and they always do a really great job, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys today. So with that, I will let our presenters take it away.
Thanks, Alicia. Amanda, did you want to start, or do you want me just to launch into this?
Please just start, Ray. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. We look forward to any opportunity to talk about this project, and we're excited about bringing it to fruition. So, any of your questions, any of your comments are going to be well received. Most of the presentations that we've done in the past, we've always walked away with a little bit more knowledge than we had before. So your comments have a very good chance of having a significant impact on how we go forward. So please, if you have a question, ask the question. We're very open to those. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I've got 20 some slides, and I kind of try to use the slides as more of a background. So if there's something on the slide that I did not talk to that interests you, please feel free to either raise your hand or follow through the protocol for asking questions, and we'll certainly address those things. I'm not trying to avoid points on the slide. I'm just cognizant of your time, and I'm trying to make sure that we give you a strategic look at what we're doing, and then leave time for more specific questions. So with that said, let's start the presentation by discussing or by reviewing kind of why this whole thing started. The fire commissioner, my boss, Marlo Pritchard, he got a position paper, received it from the SAFC, the Saskatchewan Association of Fire Chiefs, and the SVFFA. It was co-authored. And the position paper was advocating, the title there, I think most of you might have seen it already, was advocating for introduction of guidelines for provincial levels of firefighting standards and community declaration of service. Wow, that was a big title. So we got this paper, and Marla looked around the organization and was interested in actually, meeting the needs of the industry. Obviously, that's kind of one of our primary roles. So he contacted me and he said, let's look at this and Ray, come back with some recommendations on how we could move forward. So what I ended up doing was starting, obviously, going through the paper and then doing a bit of a needs assessment. And what we decided to do was look into the various regulations and acts that are available in Saskatchewan that would pertain to firefighting standards. I'll talk to the Fire Safety Act in a few slides, but for right now, I would say that the closest that we had for an OH&S regulation to communicate anything on fire standards would have been Section 32.4, the training of firefighters. And those three subsections, A, B, and C, they do speak to the fact that training needs to be done and that training needs to kind of be done with some competency, but there's no real specifics on what that looks like. Now, that's not to say that fire departments don't have standards. There are things called National Fire Protection Association standards, NFPA. They're standards for everything from training to level 1 firefighting to level 2 firefighting, hazmat, you name it. There's standards on gloves, believe it or not. So it's not like the standards don't exist. It's just that there was no direction from the local authority that would be, in this case, on the slide, OH&S, and in our case, the Fire Commissioner's Office. There was no direction on exactly what levels within those standards should be focused on. So some departments in the province could be adhering to standards, but only a portion of them, say Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, and then ignoring Chapter 3. It doesn't quite work that way, but you get the idea. So what we wanted to do is make sure that following up with a recommendation or with the request from the SAFC and SVFFA that we explored that. Again, with the OH&S regulations, didn't really speak to specifics. So I brought that back to Marlo, and we decided what we would do is this was something that was big enough that us as an organization, as an agency, we really didn't want to create something and come down the mountain with a tablet saying this is the new edict. We wanted to kind of create something that was in response to the needs of the industry. So we brought an opportunity to the Fire Chiefs Convention in, I think my dates are a bit wrong there. I'm just going to back up a second. We actually received we received this in 2020, and then maybe my dates aren't wrong. And then in May of 2020, we brought the opportunity to the SAFC to open up a new committee. And that committee, we're calling it the Provincial Training Standards Committee. And one of the subcommittees on that committee is focused entirely on the minimum standards. So at the Fire Chiefs Convention in May of 2020, we announced the opening of the committee, and we invited people to participate in the development of the minimum standards or the exploration of the minimum standards. We weren't even committed to developing it just yet. From the conference, what we got 38 folks immediately stepped up and said they were interested in participating. So we had folks that represented the SVFFA, and that's important for us to note here. The SVFFA executives are representative of the Volunteer Firefighting Association. They've been vocal all the way through the process and helping us make sure that our recommendations in the guideline are reasonable, achievable, and make sense to the Saskatchewan experience. We also included the SAFC executives, so those are the Association of Fire Chiefs. So let me just kind of clarify what those two roles do. The SVFFA is part of the Fire Chiefs Conference, Fire Chiefs Association. And what the SVFFA does is they do the training component for smaller departments. The SAFC is the organization that collects all fire chiefs together, and they kind of look at the world through the fire chief lens. So we had good executive representation from both of those organizations, which really made us comfortable saying that we had a good line of sight on what this final product was going to be. Those chiefs from the different organizations, they represented not just the large departments, but everything from the medium to small, as well as the large departments. So I think that's an important note as well, because the experiences are always different in those different sizes of communities. At every point in the development of the product, all of those folks have had their fingerprints on this and have helped us guide and really caught a lot of things that maybe we ourselves as an agency wouldn't have caught. We also included First Nations representations, and I think it's also important to note that we included some educational partners in the committee as well. Lakeland College, for one, is a large player in the Alberta fire service space, and we included Parkland College, which is our Saskatchewan representation of the fire service. They're a developing organization that really is doing good work when it comes to fire service training. So we brought them all on board together as part of this committee, and we held monthly meetings. And what we would do is we would, develop a bit of the product and bring it back to the meeting for consultation and for feedback. These folks actually did provide a lot of time to us and did a lot of homework for us, and we're very appreciative of all the work that they've done. They've really done a lot on our behalf and really helped us shape this product. But I should mention that before we started, so on our first meeting with this 38 people that's well representing the fire service, the first question we asked is, what do you guys think? We recognized that we had this position paper, but the position paper, maybe it doesn't speak to the needs of the membership. So we asked a very blunt question: Does this approach interest you? And that was a useless bullet point on a meeting agenda, quite frankly, because the overall consensus from the group, from those experts, was that this is a needed process in the province of Saskatchewan. So with that said, we proceeded with a bit more confidence, with quite a bit of confidence actually, knowing that we had the right people. We were asking the right questions, and we were looking at the right type of product. But we wanted to make sure that we could learn from our neighbors across Canada to make sure that the product that we created, I think every emergency service person that you talk to believes heavily in plagiarization. So if we can borrow something rather than invent something, we would like to do that. So we did a jurisdictional scan across Canada: British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, and Ontario. We did pull in some information from the Yukon, and we decided that at this point in time, that wasn't the approach. It was very similar to the other approaches, but it wasn't as fleshed out as maybe the other ones that are listed on the screen. So we thanked them for their information, but we didn't really follow the pattern of what they were doing there. When we did the jurisdictional scan, just some big bullet points there that some things we learned. British Columbia approaches it as a due diligence. Alberta approaches it as a self-assessment program, where the OFC there has membership. Like our SAFC, they encourage their fire chiefs to log on to their web portal, do the self-assessment online, and then that's really about it. Then the OFC can see who's participating and who's not, and it really is just more of a self-assessment tool if they choose to participate. The Manitoba experience was very close to ours. So what we're doing here, just as a give you context, is we're doing a hybrid model between the British Columbia model with a lot of the checklists and a lot of the approaches there, and the Manitoba model with how they're kind of rolling this out, how they rolled this out, and it's more of a paper-based kind of a product. So we kind of have this hybrid there. And again, the OFC in Manitoba did this as a self-assessment program as well. I should mention that none of those programs are mandatory, and we're definitely following all along that. The Ontario guys, they gave us some different information. So really, after talking to British Columbia and Manitoba, we kind of knew what to expect when we talked to Manitoba, and they were, had many of the same experiences. But the Ontario discussion was a little bit different. We definitely learned a lot of the same things, a lot of the same types of approaches, the not mandatory and whatever. But what we also learned from the Ontario experience is that they had tried this before and it didn't work out for them. And the lesson that they learned from that particular of the Ontario experience was that you needed to have a not a light switch approach, but an on-ramp approach. So that's what we did is we implemented kind of this what we anticipated to be a 16-month on-ramp. And so we still have that component, that 16-month on-ramp, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But what we've also done is when we met with the SUMA executive earlier this year, one of the questions or one of the comments that they had is even that 16 months seems a little bit tight for some communities to maybe be able to action some of these requirements. So we took that and we recognized that you know what, yeah, you're absolutely right. 16 months might be a little bit tight for some folks. And so what we did is from the particular meeting with SUMA, we adjusted kind of the program aspect of it. So we didn't change the requirements, we didn't change the standards, but from the SUMA meeting, we recognized that the 16 months wasn't the all-encompassing onboarding, but it was the self-assessment phase, and the onboarding would happen after that. So for departments that would be struggling to maybe meet some of the requirements of the service level that they want to be at, we would give them a time frame after the 16 months to be able to accomplish their particular goals. And I'll speak to that in a few minutes when I actually show you what the declaration form looks like. It'll make more sense when you see the declaration form. But all in all, we found the jurisdictional scan to be very, very helpful. And I would draw your attention to one thing here, is the fact that Saskatchewan's not on that list. So Saskatchewan is the only province that I'm aware of that does not have this approach. And so, you know, that along with the position paper, along with the consensus from the committee, the experts in our province, along with the fact that the OH&S regulations and the Fire Safety Act don't really speak to this speak to the concept of standards. We recognized that there was enough work here, there was enough evidence here that the work needed to be started. At the same point in time, we don't want to take an approach that's going to penalize communities for the sheer fact that they're small. So what we're not doing is we're not making this program mandatory. This is a voluntary process that you can choose to participate or you can choose not to participate. The benefits of participation are in our mind are very clear. We see we see that there's going to be a direct correlation between enhancing safety after the standards have been implemented to the current conditions we have now. And you know, just as an example, there are departments out there that maybe you're not aware that that equipment ages out. You need to be able to change your fire protective gear, your bunker gear. Some people call it petch gear, some people call it bunker gear. You need to be able to keep your bunker gear updated on a regular basis. Otherwise, it really does not provide you the protection you need. You need to be able to make sure that, you know, your ropes and that your the various different gloves and all the stuff that firefighters rely on for personal protection, it all has a shelf life. And so for departments that aren't aware of that and can't communicate that or haven't communicated that to their councils, you might think that your that your firefighters are well protected, but in fact they're not. So there's a safety element here, and that, you know, that is one element of safety. The other element of safety is just the level of training that maybe some departments may not be aware that that they could be doing a little bit more for the types of activities that they're encountering. For instance, if a fire department is really well in their procedures, if they're well positioned for doing interior attack in dangerous environments, they might not have the equipment or the policies that they would need to actually do those things safely. It's not to say that they get injured every time, but their risk of getting injured is heightened because they are not aware of the guidelines or not following the guidelines that are out there. There's also a benefit in terms of coordination between council and fire departments. You know, a lot of times when we see representations of fire departments on the television or on the news, we see these large, impressive departments, and we automatically think that, you know, although, you know, small town Saskatchewan's not going to look like Chicago Fire, but, you know, we have firefighters there, firefighters, we must be along the same lines of that. And I think sometimes that approach, it leads council underestimate possibly the amount of support that their fire departments need. At the same point in time, you might have some fire chiefs that are very successful in lobbying for equipment or budget items, when in fact maybe some of the stuff that they're looking for is a bit above and beyond the level of service that they need for that particular community. So there's kind of a middle ground there between the dynamic between council and fire chiefs, and these standards will kind of help meet that equilibrium where everyone's talking the same language. If we have a certain level of service for this department, council is aware of that, what that level of service is, and in fact they're funding to that level of service, and so you've got that balance. If communities decide not to participate, that's fine too. We don't anticipate, we don't have any intention to shut down fire departments. We want the citizens of Saskatchewan to be safe, but at the same point in time, we want them to be everyone to be as safe as possible, and so that's why these standards are so important to the people on the committee and to us as an agency. So non-participation, what that means is that once the onboarding period is over, just scanning my slides here, I always kind of figure out where I'm going to talk about the onboarding. I'll bring that up in a couple slides. So once the onboarding is done, then what we would do is we would do kind of a poll internally to see who's submitted letters to us saying what level of service that they're at, and who submitted letters to us saying that they're choosing not to participate. We have that option on the forms as well. So once we kind of get a poll and see who's doing what we'll do is we will send letters of acknowledgement to the communities, at whatever level of service that they've chosen, or whether they've chosen not to participate or whatever. That letter, that acknowledgement of non-participation, that letter is sent to you in confidence. You don't need to share that with your community if you don't wish. That's just simply something for your file to kind of keep in the back of your file cabinet in case something happens. Then it's important for us to be able to all kind of be on the same page with what level of service that your department was, or if you were or weren't participating in the program. There's no further outcome for that. It's just a letter of acknowledgement. All right, so we did look around at early on and to see where some guidance could be given to us on the levels of service. And we, like I say, the OH&S and the Fire Safety Act didn't really provide that for us. But what we did find in the Fire Safety Act was the mechanism that we're going to use to help us manage the program. Again, it's not mandatory that you participate in the program, but what we see in Section 17, actually Section 6 and 17 of the Fire Safety Act, is that the Fire Commissioner has the regulated authority to require paperwork, quite frankly. And so the paperwork that we're asking for in this case are the declaration forms associated with this particular project, with the minimum service levels. So we're, as a fire commissioner, we're requiring that communities provide us their declaration forms, be they this is the level we're at, or the other option is this is a level we're aiming at, we're not quite there yet, or this is the or a little checkbox on the form that says they're choosing not to participate. Whichever way communities decide to go after the 16 months of onboarding, we respect. At the same point in time, we do need that paperwork as based, as mandated by the regulation that we can request it. So to our implementation timeline, we're coming up on our actual implementation. So this again started with a position paper in April of 2020. We brought it to the Fire Chiefs Convention that year. And as of this year at the Fire Chiefs Convention, we're going to be releasing it, so to speak. So we've got the document. We're still, with all my cutting and pasting, Amanda's going crazy to make sure that it kind of has a flow. So thank you, Amanda, for all the hard work that you and Michael are doing on this. And we recognize that when we release this at this year's Fire Chief Convention in 2022, that there'll probably be some things that need to be adjusted as we go forward. So this is going to be an evergreen document, but we will release the document. We will activate the program after the Fire Chiefs Convention in May. I believe the last day of the convention is the 9th. It's the Sunday, whatever that weekend is. And what we're going to do then is that'll be the start of the 16-month onboarding. The onboarding is going to end in October 31st of 2023. And by that point in time, we're requesting that all of the declaration forms in whatever whatever box has been checked, that all the declaration forms are submitted by that time. And then once the onboarding is done, then the program starts. And again, we have another opportunity for communities to kind of work into the standards. So you don't need to be ready to go in October 2023. We need your declaration done by October 2023, and that'll make a bit more sense when we start talking about the checklists and that sort of thing. So this is what the declaration form looks like, and this is it looks relatively simple, but the declaration form is the piece of paper or the electronic scan that you're going to send into the fire commissioner's office, into the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. And this form, it really summarizes 16 months worth of work. In some departments, the levels of service, the checklists, the self-assessment checklists that go with the different levels of service, they might be relatively simple for some departments to go through, and they might be more complicated for other departments to go through. But nonetheless, even the assessment form, doing that process, whether you choose to participate or not, is going to be a really good exercise for council and the fire department to kind of all get on the same page with where they're at. I think you'll learn a lot from the checklist that maybe you didn't know before, and some of you folks will see that there's gaps that need to be addressed, and some folks will see that you're already exceeding the standard. And I think that's important to mention here, is that we're unrolling this as a minimum standards. So with the feedback we've gotten from our committee and from the folks that we've been showing this to, they're telling us that this is a very attainable minimum standard. So we're not setting the bar so high that people are going to have a hard time stepping over it. We're setting the bar as a minimum standard that that all departments should be meeting. So we're comfortable at this point that we're not asking for things that are unreasonable. Now, when you do get to the October 31st deadline, this is what we're hoping that you're able to do, is you're going to, if you can see that there, you can see that there's a yes box, a pending box, or the not participating box. The yes and the not participating, those are fairly obvious. You'll date them and sign them. We would like the signature of the local administrator or elected official, whatever you're comfortable doing there, but not just the fire chief signature and not just the administrator's signature, but we'd like that combination. Shows us that the two organizations are working kind of hand in glove there. And what you'll see here is you'll see some line items. So there's a little box that comes down. I'm hovering my mouse like you can see my mouse. I doubt you can. On the left side of the form there, I see a comment that there's latency issues. Should I stop for a second while we fix the problem, or should we keep on going at them?
Hi, Ray. You can keep.
Okay, so on the left side of the screen there, you'll see that there's a column that says line number. In the middle, you'll see description of the upgrade, and then you'll see estimated budget. On the far right side, you'll see the estimated compliance date. So what we're going to ask you to do when you submit your declaration form in October is we want you to cross-reference the assessment sheets that you've been using. Each assessment checklist has a line number. So for instance, let's say this declaration form you're declaring as a defensive level. The very top is a defensive level service. So you're declaring it a defensive level. So we would assume then that you're using the defensive level checklists. So say defensive level checklist is line item 78. You didn't, you have some gaps there. Using my description of the bunker gear or the patch gear, let's say that you don't have up-to-date bunker gear for all of your firefighters. Say 6 of them need updated gear and 4 of them are good to go. So what you would do is you would put line 78, indicating which line is has a bit of work to do. You would give us a description of the upgrade. In this case, you would say we need to upgrade 4 sets of bunker gear. You would give us kind of what the estimated budget would be. I would anticipate something like that would be, 6 sets of gear would probably be 20 grand, 25 grand. I'm not sure. It's a big ticket item. We recognize that. And what we would look at then is we would look at what your estimated compliance date would be. So if you tell us, for 6 sets of gear that cost $25 or $2,500, then maybe 3 years is a reasonable time frame, maybe 2 years. So whatever you think is reasonable to be able to adjust your community's budget and to be able to address those needs, that's fine. However, if we see that you put line 74 where one firefighter needs a pair of gloves, and you say the estimated budget is $75 and the compliance date is 2035, well, then we know that maybe there's some room to kind of negotiate there. And this is not a negotiation. We're just looking to make sure that all parties are operating in good faith and working toward a standard. So that, I think, is where the value of this process is it gives departments and it gives local councils a really good line of sight on what budget impacts could look like over a period of time. It gives you things to shoot for that will result in you being able to meet a minimum service level for whatever level of service that you want. So again, we're not looking at October 2023 to be the date where you have all these things purchased. We're looking at October 2023 to be the date you tell us what you're doing to adhere to the minimum standard. And if that takes 2 years, if that takes 1 year, if that takes 3 years, well, so be it. We'll work with you on that as long as we feel, again, that we are putting in some effort here to meet this as rapidly and realistically as possible. So what are the 3 levels of service then? Typical government, we say 3 levels of service, and then we have a slide with 4 bullet points on it. So the 4th bullet point, this was a feedback that we got from our committee. Excuse me. Feedback we got from our committee that really, given climate change and given the large grassland fires that have been occurring in the south in the last number of years, we really need to add that particular level of service in, because it's quite possible that some very small departments don't really have an interest in doing defensive level operations, but they have a strong interest in the wildland grass service. So wildland grassland firefighting can be a standalone. You can just submit it as that, or what you can do is you can add it a la carte to one of the other three options. Defensive is the basic level service, offensive is the middle level service, and then full operations, that's going to be those larger departments. And as we kind of go through some of those things, I think you'll see why the full operations department is really relegated more toward the full-time large departments because of the requirements. So the requirements in the defensive operations, I think you're all going to have copies of the presentation, so I'm not going to try to read this word for word. But what I would say, the most important piece of this slide in my mind is the fact that the defensive level operations, number one, have existed in this province for a number of years now. And in fact, what we've done is we've taken the training recommendations for the defensive level from existing documents that were used. I think it was called firefighter endorsement. It was it's been printed and it's been approved by the government of Saskatchewan. And what it does is I'm sorry about that. What it does is it identifies 60 hours of specific training, 40 hours worth of classroom training, and then 20 hours worth of field training or worth of drill. So those this is nothing new. We're not introducing anything new in the province of Saskatchewan. We're just trying to define and wrap things up into standardized service levels. So the 60 hours of training, 40 in the class, 20 kind of practical, what it results in is it results in a department that you go and fight fire and you do the firefighter things, but you should not have prolonged exposure. You should not be putting your firefighters in prolonged IDLH environments. And IDLH environments, those are defined as anything from a structure is unsafe due to a fire. The structure is unsafe just because it's unsafe. Some old buildings are unsafe to go in. Potentially, especially after maybe a wind event, if the fire chief recognizes the building shouldn't be entered, well, at a defensive level, obviously that should be avoided. But also where it gets a little bit more realistic would be in suggesting that a structure that's on fire, that's full of smoke or full of heat, is also an IDLH environment, and the firefighters should not be engaging in offensive operations. So doing entry into a building, a structure fire, while there's an IDLH situation, must be minimized or avoided. So that causes folks to really kind of second or take a second look, and we understand that. Again, when people think of their firefighters and think of their fire department, they have the perception based on what they see on television. But at a defensive level, what we're saying is, if you're operating at that level, we get it, but your firefighters should not be going interior offensive attacks for things like this, if at all possible. On the offensive piece, we figure this is going to be a bulk of the small, less than the mid-range departments. So if you're kind of a Saskatoon or a Regina, or you're a Moose Jaw or a Yorkton, you'll probably be, or PA or a North Battleford, or possibly potentially Nipawin, certainly a Humboldt. You'd probably be operating at the operation. Sorry, I kind of mixed that all together there. The Saskatoons and Reginas and PAs will probably be at the full operations, the Moose Jaws as well, potentially the Yorktons. But most other folks that are in that mid-range size will be operating likely at the offensive level, where they're able to go and do interior attacks. But what they should be doing is on their interior attacks, no restrictions with single-family dwellings, no restrictions for commercial and small structures. But when you have these relatively, say, large manufacturing structures or wide-span buildings, maybe manufacturing plants, those sorts of structures are quite complex when it comes to firefighting. Smoke and flames move in a weird direction. There's typically unusual fire loads in those places that create all kinds of nuances and kind of complications. So what we're saying at the offensive level, if you're in a community that maybe has some of those complicated buildings, it's fine to do interior attacks at the offensive level if, in the second bullet point, you see that the department is also doing pre-plans. And that pre-plan, again, I'll come back to, this is nothing new. This is stuff that should already being done based on NFPA standards by all departments. If you have commercial structures in your community, your local departments should be having pre-plans in their trucks. They know where the gas shutoffs are. They know where the say, for instance, where the acetylene tanks are being stored. They know where the propane is. They know all those things, because that building is complex and it needs kind of a coordinated approach before you send folks in. Otherwise, you can find yourself in some trouble. So we do this in Saskatoon. We do this in all communities, and this is nothing new. It's just been articulated as a part of a minimum service. The full operations, I'll draw your attention to the second bullet point from the bottom. This is, you'll have firefighters trained to 1001 level 2. So that is kind of the thing that really puts this out of reach for, even if you're an organized department based on volunteers, it's sometimes difficult to, it's often difficult to get firefighters all trained to that particular level. So we recognize that. And so this particular standard relies on the fact that these folks are all trained to that level. You've got documentation, certified, and that kind of seems to be the thing that we think that draws a line. The full operations departments also get into things, obviously, like hazardous materials, not just awareness, which is a very minimum level, but technician level, where they're actually going in and dressing up in those chemical suits and spinning valves and offloading product and doing all the technical things. So when you're talking full operations, you're talking, these departments that have quite a bit of capacity in rescue and hazmat and those sorts of things. So and I'll just pause on that for a second. This is fire service minimum service levels. So when we're talking about full operations, we do not define, what level of hazmat training. We just assume that, we ignore, quite frankly, anything that does not have to do with firefighting. So we don't speak to auto extrication at this point. We don't speak to hazmat at this point. We don't speak to high angle rescue, confined space rescue. We're just narrowly focused in this iteration of this guideline for firefighting. It's a minimum service fire department. I won't spend a lot of time in the wildland grassland. It's not my forte, and we have a whole division within the SPSA that does the training. And so what the wording in the guideline is just that the wildland grass fire training should be provided by a recognized entity, and then we point you to our organization that can provide you with that training. We're almost done. Hopefully that we have some questions. I'm looking forward to getting some feedback. As I mentioned, we're starting in 2023, and we're going to be onboarding we're starting at the end of the SAFC conference this year in May, and we're going to be onboarding. We're giving you the opportunity as fire departments and councils to do your department assessment up until October 2023. That's 16 months. From that point, we'd like to have your declaration submitted via email. It's all kind of identified in the guideline how that's supposed to look. And then that's when the program starts. So we'll look at your pending list and we'll make sure that kind of it does make sense to us in terms of the timeline. It's not too short. We don't want you to panic over this, but we also want to make sure that we're all kind of working toward a reasonable timeline. But how do we manage the program once the kind of that's been launched? What we don't want to do is we don't want to be underfoot. We don't want to create so much distraction for your fire chiefs that they're managing paper. That's not why they're doing the job. They're doing the job because they're interested in public safety in their communities, and we're not asking them to be librarians or administrators. So what we're going to do is we're going to have trigger points that would provide us opportunities to help your community with a service review. The first two trigger points there in the sub bullets, they're basically the same things that we would use to send a fire investigator to your community. So right now, we would send a fire investigator to community if there's an injury or a fatality. We would send a fire investigator to your community if there's a large dollar loss to the structures in your community. So those two things automatically trigger a fire investigator from the SPSA to kind of go and either come alongside your investigators or to do the investigation themselves and provide you with the information. The third piece there, the mutual aid piece, this is more of a program review for us. We want to make sure that the service guidelines, as we're introducing them, are not creating more difficulty with the relationship between departments. So anytime that there is a mutual aid fire response when there's multiple operational periods, so I'll just define that for a second. Most fire departments in the province of Saskatchewan use the incident command system. And within the incident command system, what the incident commander is tasked to do early on is to define what their objectives are, what they're trying to accomplish, what are the highest priority objectives. And what they'll do is then they'll base an operational period based on how long they think those high priority objectives would be. So for instance, if you want to reduce the amount of flooding in your community by 1.5 feet over the next 16 hours, then that 16 hours becomes kind of your operational period. So what we're saying is we don't want to just every time you have a mutual aid response to show up and look at your paperwork. What we want to be able to do is we want to say for these really large, unusual types of events within your community that have multiple operational periods, we want to be able to kind of look at those, use those as an opportunity to come alongside your fire department and the mutual aid folks that within your fire service area to make sure that the service levels are not getting in your way and that they're being that hopefully they're being somewhat helpful. Almost wrapping up here, just to say that this program again is not mandatory. Now we feel the benefits of this will be enhanced safety, and we feel that the clarity that is going to come from defined standards are going to help departments both in terms of their relationship with their communities as well as their relationship with their elected officials and their administration. We're not making this mandatory. So non-participants, aside from submitting your declaration form in October 2023, as based on Section 6 and 17 of the Fire Safety Act, that's kind of what we're requesting. After that, if you've chosen to not participate, then you'll receive that letter of acknowledgement that you're not participating, and that's really where it is. Now, if you ever choose to jump in later on and participate, the minimum service guidelines will be available on our website. They'll be available through the SAFC, SVFFA, and if at any given time in the future where your community or your fire chief decides it is a good idea for you to participate after maybe initially deciding to sit out, then you'll have the opportunity. So this isn't a one and done thing. This is an ongoing program. You'll be able to jump in at any point in time in the future as well. Once you do participate, if once you make your declaration, then we would then send you a letter updating that you are participating, and then you could kind of get rid of the letter that said you're not participating. So it's more of a paper thing. So with that said, thank you for your attention, and I hope I made sense, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Adam?
Hi there. Can you guys hear me okay? Good to go? Okay, it looks like we have a lot of really good questions in the chat here. Um, let's start off. I hope I'm at the top of this. So just bear with me. Um, let's see. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit this morning, folks. The first question, does the SPFA have a register of all volunteer fire departments, as in, are they all registered with the SPSA or not?
I think we rely on the SVFFA and SAFC to help us with that database, and even we have a fairly comprehensive database. But I have a feeling that we are missing a few folks in that database. So I would say that it's a work in progress, and we have a bulk of the departments that are registered, but and not everybody. Amanda, would I be? I see you nodding there. You probably have more information there than I do.
Yeah, I can expand on that a little bit. Can you hear me okay? Yep, okay. So we don't have a registration program, I would say, through the SPSA. We don't register fire departments, but we do have obviously a contact list because they are a huge stakeholder for us. So we have a very comprehensive list of volunteer departments. What we do find is when there is turnover of, fire chiefs and things, we aren't always notified. So if you check with your community department and, just say, hey, reach out to the SPSA. Ray has his email on there. Mine is accessible online as well, or you can just email the general spsa@gov.sk.ca and it'll make its way to me as well. But yes, we do rely on SVFFA and SAFC to provide us with some information as well. And not all volunteer departments are automatically registered with SVFFA, so we encourage that they do that as well, as we share a lot of information with those associations and ask them to disseminate to their member departments.
Okay, great. The next question is, how is this all going to be rolled out? Through administration, through the departments, through SARM?
Take that one too, and Ray, fill in anything I might miss there. So we are rolling out this program on May 5th. Like Ray said, that is the first day of the SAFC conference, and we just felt that timing was perfect timing, given that's kind of where it started 2 years ago. So the guidelines themselves will be up on our website. We're hoping that day, save any technical issues. And we will be sending letters out to both fire chiefs and council the following week to announce the program and more formally. And we'll also be asking our, partner associations like SUMA, SARM, SAFC, SVFFA to also share that information, just in case we miss somebody, to just really have the information as accessible and as available as possible. I'll just also add that Ray spoke a lot of the October 2023. That is our end date. So with this 16-month onboarding or assessment declaration phase that starts at the beginning of May in just a couple weeks. Folks can submit their completed forms anytime between that 16-month period. Obviously, we want to have meaningful conversations happening between fire chiefs and councils. So, if we get a whole bunch right at first that are saying no participate, a lot can happen in 16 months. So, and there's a lot to do there, but just wanted to make that clarification as well.
Okay, the next question is there hours of training standard for offensive like defensive has 60?
No, we have not gone to that level of detail. What we're looking for there is we're looking for giving guidelines on capacity, and however long it takes you to get to that level of capacity, we're relying on you to have done that appropriately. Now, if you do, so that's it. We're leaving it to your judgment to figure out what you need for your department to get to that particular level of expertise. but we
Okay.
give you guidelines on what should be involved in there. So a lot of that stuff, you know, I'd iterate again that we're not introducing anything new here. So these textbooks all exist, these standards all exist. You can download training synopsises and instructor kind of what do you call them, lesson plans from free from places like Rescue One, and those all kind of provide you that level of detail. So we thought that if we would try to include that in the guidelines, the guideline would end up being encyclopedic. It'd end up being so thick, and it'd just be reproducing stuff that's being produced anyways.
Okay. The next question is, will there be a rescue minimum standards in the future?
Well, rescue is a big concept. So within the NFPA world, rescue is all rolled up into one standard, 1006. So when you're talking about 1006, that rescue standard includes things like high angle rescue, low angle rescue, confined space rescue, trench rescue. It includes, I believe, water rescue now. It'll also include things like building collapse rescue. So when we're talking rescue, as soon as you get into these little specialty areas like firefighting, we tend to make things more difficult and more complicated. So I would say within rescue, we're not going to talk about rescue, but there is some work that's begun in terms of auto extrication. And so if that's the question specifically, auto extrication does also exist in 1006. What we're looking at doing here is we're looking at providing some detail from an SGI initiative on an auto extrication standard. But in terms of the other standards, we haven't gone down that road. So at this point in time, we do have an appendix at the back of our firefighting minimum standards to make room for the auto extrication project that we're just starting now.
Okay, great. I guess we'll stay tuned for that one. With the training hours, where or who should those be done through? Do you have any guidelines or suggestions?
Yeah, so in the minimum standards, what we're recommending, we know that it's difficult in a large province like Saskatchewan, given the type of organization that the SPSA is. We recognize that it could be difficult for departments. Excuse me. It could be difficult for departments to actually get certified instructors. So what we're saying is, we'd prefer it if you had a 1041 instructor. So that's our standard for fire service instructors. We'd prefer you to have a 1041 level 1 or level 2 instructor, but if that isn't the case, then a competent instructor is fine. I saw another question in here, so I'm gonna hold back on either some of the answers, or I'll wait for I can maybe roll up another question here. Was there I think Mark Wilson, is there a plan to ramp up additional training? So do you mind, Alicia, if I kind of roll that question into this answer?
No, take it away.
Okay, so when it comes to accessing trainers, or it comes to accessing instructors, the guidelines, it just says we'd like them to be someone who has competency, and then if at all possible, 1041 instructors. And then Mark's question was, is there a plan to ramp up additional training? So I think that's a really good question. Our organization at this point, historically and in the immediate future, we do not have a training capacity. What we have is we have a certification capacity. So we manage test banks from another organization called IFSAC, International Fire Accreditation Congress, I think is what IFSAC stands for. And what they do is they make sure that when you're teaching to the NFPA standard, that the educational process is valid. So we are not requiring people in these minimum standards to become certified or to be taught by certified instructors. What we're requiring, or what we're asking them to do, is have somebody that is competent within the instructing abilities to use the textbooks and the standards that are available to teach to those standards. So what we're doing to make more accessibility for people to do training is we're signing MOUs with various different departments and associations to allow them to actually do their own training and still access our IFSAC test bank. So right now, for instance, we don't have anybody that can teach a hazmat course. So if you wanted to take hazmat at the awareness level, operations level, and technician level, that by itself would probably end up being about a month or so worth of training. So we don't have the ability to send an instructor and do that month worth of training with your department. What we do, though, is once you're ready to take the test, we have people that can go out and we can have people that can certify you to the IFSAC standard. So you get a seal, almost like your journeyman seal, the red seal, if you will. So we have the ability to do the testing, but not necessarily the training. So with these MOUs, what we're able to do now is we're able to say, following the IFSAC rules, if you have enough people in your department or your association or group of departments that can have somebody who can teach and somebody who is accredited that can come in who is not associated with teaching and do your own certification, you can do the whole process and still access our test banks. So right now we have an agreement with Saskatoon and Regina that they're both those departments can now start to ramp up their training and get certified. We're looking at an agreement to get signed with Swift Current. They're very interested, and there's a couple of other smaller departments that have also entered dialogue with me that they want to start doing that. So I would say, Mr. Wilson, I would say that we are making training more available by these MOUs, by and also by not requiring within the standard for people to be IFSAC certified. So I don't think we're getting in the way. We certainly are putting a higher focus on training and higher focus on the standards that are within those training areas, but we're not we don't have the ability to actually do the teaching.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit on our questions because this is kind of tied to it, and you've answered a little bit of it already. Is there instructors available for small departments, and if so, what are the costs? I feel like you've answered a bit of the first half of the question, but I'm wondering if you have any insight on the second. And if we can maybe expand upon that, you talked about some of the larger centers having, trainers, accredited trainers, and so forth. Is there any way for folks in the smaller communities to access that information? So maybe they could do some outreach to the larger centers? To borrow a trainer?
Yeah, I think there's so many different nuances, so many different potential complications within that question. I'd be happy to answer the question, but if that person could email me, I would walk them through what their opportunities would be in their area. I think that'd be the easiest, because if I answer a question in a specific way, that may not pertain to a different community, and they might get the wrong impression. So I think there's always a path forward. It's just a matter of how we help you with that path. So.
Okay, well, we can definitely do some follow-up work with that one. The next question is, our fire chief does not normally attend the SAFC conference. Will information be directly sent to municipalities?
Amanda, if you want to you've been working on that comms plan, so.
That one. So yes, we will be sending letters out after the SAFC conference the week after. So I think that's about May 9th, 10th. We plan on having them in the mail, so it might take a couple of days to get to folks, but we do plan on emailing the fire chiefs, just because we don't have everyone's mailing address. We find that's going to be the best way to hit that group. And then also letters will be sent hard copy to council as well, to municipalities.
Okay, great. I think we're getting close to being done with questions. I'll just give a minute to make sure we're good. And maybe just one final question. Do you have any advice for, say, you have a fire department that, say, doesn't want to participate, but it's something that the council feels is very important for that participation? Do you have any advice to give on if there's any differing of opinions?
Absolutely. We have staff that can work with the fire chiefs and counselors. We call them our ESOs, and they're well versed in the whole process and the NFPA, the firefighting standards. And so what I would suggest is maybe communities that find themselves in that position, they work through our ESO experts to be able to help them kind of navigate the best way forward for that.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all we've got going on for today. I want to thank you guys for your time in the presentation. I think it was great. There was a lot of information. And we look forward to hearing more about this as you unveil it.
Thank you so much. Amanda and I both appreciate the opportunity to talk to you folks. And I would imagine that as you start to think about things, you might think of some new questions. Please, whatever channel you want to use directly to us through Adam and Alicia, whatever channel, we're here to answer your questions. And we're excited about moving this forward. But every question makes us think and makes us reevaluate. And it's a very healthy process for us. So please don't hesitate with asking your questions.
Well said.
Great.
Thank you.
And with that, I guess we can conclude our session today, folks.
Right. Nice to see you. Nice to be seen by you all.
Thank you.